We're an island nation, drawn to the sea that surrounds us. For many, it's a playground. For others, it's where we earn our living. But the sea's unpredictable. It can change in an instant. And when accidents happen, they happen very fast.
The sea is a dangerous place. If you don't respect the sea will bite you.
There to save our lives is a volunteer army of nearly 5,000 ordinary people, ready to leave their jobs, their families, to race to our rescue.
It makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, to know that if it wasn't for you, that person wouldn't be here.
They rescued me, but they also saved a mum, a daughter, a sister, a wife.
Oh my God.
To see someone disappear under the water right in front of you is brutal. It's absolutely horrendous.
Equipped with their own cameras,
My light flashing. Yeah, mine.
the crews give us a unique insight into every call-out as only they see it.
Right, there's another little wave.
Speeding through the roughest weather, searching for people who may only have moments to live.
Can you still hear me?
For those who risk their lives, it has become a way of life.
When those pagers go off, it's life and death.
On the mouth of the River Clwyd in North Wales, the tourist town of Rhyl is famous for its wide, expansive coastline.
At low water, you can have up to a mile of beach out towards the sea.
We've got loads of sandbanks everywhere, but through the years, they change. Like, you might have a big storm and things will change on the beach. It's not always how it looks one day. It might look a bit different the next.
Home to a Mersey-class and D-class lifeboat, the station here is one of the busiest in Wales.
The summer months are usually busier with holidaymakers.
I think the local area population triples in size during the summer. So we get a lot of people who from inland who don't really understand the dangers of the beach.
You can spend many an hour chasing dinghies in the summer season, not knowing whether the child is still in the dinghy.
Recently we've had a lot more people with boats after the harbour's been done up. There's a lot more people with pleasure boats using the area.
As dawn breaks on a calm summer's morning, the Rhyl lifeboat crew receive an emergency call.
I think it was around 5:30 in the morning, 5:30 to 6 o'clock. So yeah, I was still in bed.
A dog walker has seen a distress flare offshore and alerted the Coast Guard.
We were told that somebody'd seen a red flare, and a couple of the lads who were up in the crew room could see a boat from that direction drifting.
A red flare is usually a distress call, and with very few boat users out at this time of day, the lifeboat crew know they need to get out fast.
Early morning shout, you know it's not going to be tourists on dinghies being blown offshore. You know it's potentially something fairly serious. But this particular morning, we didn't think we'd be presented with the call-out that we had.
The casualty is almost a mile out to sea, and so to launch as quickly as possible, the station's smaller D-class inshore lifeboat is deployed. Ten minutes after launching, the crew approached the location from where the flare was fired.
As we were getting a bit close, you could start to make out the boat ourselves. Once we got a little bit closer, you could start to see an object not far from the boat, a bit closer into shore.
As they near, it becomes clear that this shout is as serious as they thought.
I remember both of us looking at each other and thinking, oh, we need to head for that first, because if somebody's in a boat and it's adrift, they're fine where they are. Whereas if it's somebody in the water, you've got to get to that first.
As we approached the shape in the water, it became clear that it was a person, and he was face down.
Highway, that's affirmative. We have one person in the water also, over.
When you see somebody face down in the water, you immediately think worst case scenario.
We knew that he was floating on the life ring, but other than that, yeah, you start getting your care stuff going through your mind on having an unconscious casualty.
Then, to the crew's relief, there are signs of life.
You hear me? You all right?
And once he responded, we knew he was conscious.
He's alive, but exactly why this casualty is in the water is still unknown. So the crew must now consider their personal safety too.
Show me your other hand.
What we're trained to do is make sure that we can see both hands and that there's nothing that may cause us harm in the hands.
You all right? Yeah. Okay, we're going to spin you around. Yeah. I can't feel my legs, mate. How long you been in the water? A couple of hours. Really? 12 hours.
Even in the summer months, a couple of hours in the water can have a great drain on your core body temperature.
There's a thing called hydrostatic squeeze. So if somebody's been in the water for too long, the pressure of the water can relax all the blood vessels in them. And if you pull them out of the water too quickly, vertically, they can go into cardiac arrest. So that was one of the reasons why we had to really make sure that we laid him flat and then covered him up to keep him warm, because obviously he was then hypothermic.
I'll be Holyhead. We'll Alpha copy now.
We didn't know if there was anybody else involved at that time, so we investigated, had a look on the boat to see if there was anybody else there. There wasn't. He then confirmed that he was the only person that had been on the boat.
Okay.
He was showing signs of really quite severe hypothermia, so yeah, we needed to get him back to somewhere warm quickly.
He kept asking questions, relaying the information onto the Coast Guard, who in turn were also wanting more information.
You know who launched it? Me? Right, okay. Did you launch off a trailer, did you? Or?
It was even more suspicious, questioning how he'd ended up in the water from the vessel and why hadn't he stayed on the vessel to be rescued or recovered.
How, did you just fell out the boat? Yeah. Were you trying to get the engine going or something? Yeah. What happened ever? I don't have a car. It wasn't my boat. It's not your boat? No.
Whose is it?
I have no idea, mate. I got really drunk and I woke up in the sea. What happened, man?
The penny finally dropped that he'd taken it. We were obviously quite shocked. I wondered how he would have come to the position of taking the boat in the condition that he was. Through asking him questions, we'd found out that he'd been on a night out the night before and taken a walk down towards the harbour, and for some reason thought it was a good idea to get on board a boat that was alongside a pontoon and then drifted out to sea. I'd say he was extremely lucky. Lucky that he'd had the foresight to try and kit himself out with as much equipment that he could that was on the boat, that he'd thought about taking a flare with him into the water, that the lady was walking a dog at that time of the morning, she saw the flare. There weren't many people on the prom at that time of the day. We'd handed him over to the paramedics. The ambulance took him off to hospital, and he took it upon himself to escape the ambulance and make his way home in a hospital gown, as we understand it.
The casualty was later arrested and given a custodial sentence.
I never think that I've seen it all. There's always a surprise. Always expect the unexpected.
For lifeboat crews around the country, every shout brings its own lessons.
Since I've joined the RNLI, I've learned that I don't know everything. I haven't got every skill and every bit of knowledge.
I've learnt that I have deeper depths than I thought I had, that I have more perseverance than I thought I had.
I've learnt I don't get seasick very easily. I've also learnt that you can take all the precautions in the world, you can be prepared for anything, and just occasionally the sea will throw something at you that you're not ready for.
Every rescue teaches a little bit more respect. Each rescue gives you something else to think about, take back and discuss as a team.
For a start, when I first joined, you'd be a bit flustered and a bit panicky, and I've managed to, over the time, you could control all that.
Got ya. Dealing with people that are in that dire state of need, and you are the only person that can make a difference, that really does change your outlook.
Right, let's get some water. I think you learn about yourself every day, and I think if you don't, maybe you're dangerous.
Lying off North Wales, in the infamously unforgiving waters of the Irish Sea, is the island of Anglesey, home to 4 lifeboat stations. The region is famed as a beauty spot, but the waters around this coastline are full of hazards for the unwary.
We've got quite a dangerous coast, to be honest with you. Tidal flows and reefs, a lot of hidden rocks that are quite far out.
It's a very popular area for scuba diving. We've got that many wrecks around the island. There's divers that come here for years and are diving new spots constantly.
Divers exploring Anglesey's waters are spoilt for choice. There are currently over 100 shipwrecks off the coast. They include one of the UK's most famous wrecks, that of the Royal Charter. In 1859, this ship set sail for Liverpool from Melbourne. Many of its 370 passengers were Australian gold miners, and the ship was full of gold worth tens of millions of pounds in today's money. As the Royal Charter rounded Anglesey, it was caught in hurricane force 12 winds and destroyed on the rocks, with only 41 passengers surviving. That night, a further 200 ships were wrecked by the same storm. The scale of this maritime disaster kick-started the development of the Meteorological Office and the advent of weather forecasts to help prevent similar tragedies. Nowadays, the western coast of Anglesey is home to the Triada Bay Lifeboat Station, which covers 20 miles of rugged coastline.
Summer's busier for us, but the summer jobs are less stressful. They're usually something and nothing. If we get called out in winter, it's usually something serious, you know.
49-year-old Daffyd Griffiths has been a volunteer at the station for nearly 18 years and lives with his wife and family nearby.
When his pager goes off, it is just the house is in chaos. They're manic, they bark, they run around, because obviously they think that somebody's rung the doorbell. Yeah.
He's a four-legged trip hazard, really.
Bad things do happen, and you never know if it could be the last time. That's why we always have a rule that we never say goodbye when he goes on a shout. It's always see you later.
I've always had a lot to do with the sea. When I was a kid, I used to work on the fishing boats in Amlwch. So, yeah, so salt's in my blood, you could say. Yeah, I've actually been rescued by the RNLI, which is, yeah, I don't tell a lot of people that, to be honest with you. Bit late now telling you, but yeah.
We'd only been going out with each other for about 3 weeks, and he was supposed to be picking me up at lunchtime, and he didn't turn up. About 8 o'clock that evening, I heard his car pull up, and I swung the door open, and he was stood there with a bright red sunburnt face, with a white mark around it, obviously where his suit had been. And I said to him, you know, what the hell have you been doing? He said, oh, I've been floating around the Irish Sea for 4 hours and been rescued by a lifeboat. Do you fancy going for a drink?
A July afternoon. The Triada Bay crew have been paged.
We were initially told that there was 3 divers in the water in the Roscollin Beacon area. That's basically all we need to know at that point, so we know whether to turn left or right.
A group of divers have got into difficulty at a popular local dive site.
Yeah, a lot of stuff goes through your mind, what they could, if they've got any injuries, burst lungs or anything like that. There's a few things that go through your mind. My first shout on this crew was to a diver that drowned. That's 17 odd years ago. Because of a couple of things he forgot due to panic more than anything, he drowned for the sake of forgetting one little thing. It cost him his life. Soul destroying, but we save more than we lose, luckily.
The Atlantic B-Class's twin 115 horsepower engines mean the lifeboat crew cover the 3.5 miles to the scene in just 10 minutes. On arrival, they discover that 3 divers are stranded on a small outcrop known as Englishman's Rock. The dive support boat raised the alarm, as it's too big to get in near the rock in the large swell. After assessing the situation, the Atlantic crew soon realized they're in a similar predicament.
Our Atlantic, we can get people off rocks with it, but the sea conditions on that day, we couldn't have got them off where they were without damaging the boat.
The crew radios the lifeboat station and requests the smaller D-class boat.
The sea conditions on the day were, it was choppy.
It was kind of conditions that you wouldn't really expect people to be diving in.
The D-class is more maneuverable than the Atlantic when close to rocks, but it's also more vulnerable to capsizing in large swells. "15 minutes after launching, the second crew reach Englishman's Rock.
First thing we saw when we arrived on scene was the divers had made their way over to the south part of the rock, south-facing part of the rock.
Their new position is easier for the lifeboat to reach, but all 3 exhausted divers are now more exposed to the rising swells, which could sweep them away.
We had a look, and there was quite a narrow and tricky little passage into the rock. I mean, there was submerged rocks just below the surface, either side, so we didn't really have a choice of how we'd approach it, because there was no other option.
Basically, you have to read the sea, you wait for the biggest wave, and then, in theory, you should be all right then for the next few.
The Atlantic hangs back to keep its engines out of danger, while the D-class tries to weave its way in.
As we were approaching the rock for me to go ashore, a wave surprised us and just washed us up onto the rock a little, you know, the nose of the boat onto the rock.
I think instantly I was thinking that the back end would just get taken around, dumped on the rocks, and the following wave would just turn us right over. But yeah, fortunately, Delmy's a big guy, managed to drag the nose around and down and make sure I could then keep the engine in the water and clear of the rocks.
The swells are now coming in so fast that the D-class crew can only take on board 1 diver at a time to avoid damage to their hull, or worse, being capsized.
It's a matter of seconds then, jump in, and then they go out on the same wave as they more or less came in. It's sort of seconds.
The first diver is now safe, but the other 2 must wait anxiously on the rocks until the D-class can return.
Yeah, the divers, they were looking pretty cold, pretty panicked.
I don't think I've ever come across divers so keen to leave their gear behind, to be honest with you. It doesn't usually happen, but these 3, what about your gear? Doesn't matter. So I decided they've had a bit of a scare there, without a doubt.
It was a feeling of of great relief. I just wanted to get off the rocks, come home, see my family that night. Getting pulled onto the big lifeboat felt very nice indeed.
To retrieve the remaining divers, the D-class crew must head back into the large breaking swells, timing their approach to perfection on 2 more runs.
I was just absolutely exhausted, and I've never felt more exhausted in my life, mentally and physically.
The 3 divers had set out in sunshine.
The sea was slightly choppy, but there was no concerns that it was going to turn out how it did.
Chris, Nicky and Martin's dive had gone routinely until they started to surface after half an hour.
My wife and Martin suddenly were pulled away from me, so I was left on my own at that point.
A dramatic change in sea conditions had created unexpectedly strong currents.
As we surfaced, I thought, who has changed the season? Because I have never come up in waves before. I know choppy waters, and I've been in choppy waters, but I've never been in waves that have come over the back of my head.
The rough sea conditions swept all 3 divers away from their support boat. To make matters worse, Chris had no idea where his wife, Nicky, and their dive partner were.
I can't see our boat. I can't see Nicky and Martin.
Where was Chris? That was my first thoughts. Where was Chris?
I started shouting to Nicky and Martin.
To hear Chris's voice in that situation is not something I would ever want to repeat in my life. I was hearing him in distress. I couldn't at that time do anything to help.
After a few minutes of searching frantically for her husband amidst the waves, Nicky finally spotted him, and the 3 divers were reunited.
It was like, OK, we're all together now. Now we can think about what do we do next.
Chris, Nicky and Martin had a stroke of luck. The current took them past an outcrop of rocks.
The danger really was actually getting onto the rocks safely, because you could have been thrown against the rocks with the strength of the waves.
No injuries at all. I think the only injured thing they had was their pride, but no, they were fine.
The divers are finally reunited with their support boat. Their rescuers decide to make one more trip to the rocks to retrieve their abandoned equipment.
The divers came back. They weren't expecting to get their stuff back. They were pleased. They were made up, actually.
When we were packing up, Nicky was quite upset, and thought, I need to give my folks a ring, so my kids a ring. And I could feel it then. I was trying to say to them, there's nothing to worry about. We've had a bit of an incident, but I could feel my voice going a little bit. And yeah, it was upsetting. It was a scary time, and it was just a massive relief to get back.
They brought us chocolates. Heroes. yeah. 4 boxes of Heroes they were, yeah.
While a lot of people do think of lifeboat crews as heroes, you'll be hard-pressed to find one who can bring themselves to agree.
I wouldn't say I'm brave. I hate spiders, so I wouldn't say I'm brave.
I think you need to have a certain element of bravery to put yourself in the predicaments that we tend to end up in on call-outs.
No, I wouldn't think I was brave at all. No, it's just something you do. Stupid.
You are only human. Just because you're on a rubber duck in a nice yellow suit doesn't make you invincible, if you like.
I don't think it's bravery because it's not conscious. I don't have to summon up any kind of spirit
inside me to say, right, I'm going to be brave now. You're just part of a team, doing the right thing.
When you're on the boat and you're returning home, you just look around at the crew and they're sort of, they're happy with themselves, you know. It's a good feeling, you know, it's a real pride. They do it because they love it, they don't want the praise. Take it on the chin and love what they do.
Good, well done. Thanks, John. No worries.
In Suffolk, the seaside town of Lowestoft is the most easterly settlement in the whole of the United Kingdom. Over the years, seafarers here have had to adapt, first to the needs of the North Sea oil and gas industries, and now to 21st century industries offshore.
Lowestoft is a seaside town. It used to be busy with the fishing industry, but now it has more wind farm business that's just started off our coast.
The town has had a lifeboat station for over 215 years. And over the generations, crews here have received more than 45 medals for gallantry.
We get a lot of yachts that are in difficulty. Be they lost rigging, lost power.
The most challenging part of Lowestoft is the entrance, the tide across the entrance and the buoyed channels to the north and to the south, which you have to be stuck to or you stand a chance of running aground on shifting sandbanks.
On a warm June evening, the station receives an emergency call. A disabled sailor is in trouble out at sea.
I was at home on Sunday evening when my pager went off. I think I was watching Countryfile, and my husband looked at me and just said goodbye as I ran outside.
We received the information as a single-handed disabled sailor. He'd had his mainsail blown out and he had no engine. So the plan was to return him to Lowestoft.
A storm is coming in, and the Coast Guard is concerned that the sailor is drifting towards Dover's busy shipping lanes.
The sea conditions on the day in question there was quite a strong southerly blow, so the wind was coming from the south and building the seas up. So as we were going to the casualty, I guess there was about 2 or 3 metres of swell that we were punching into as we were running south.
Lowestoft has a Shannon-class all-weather lifeboat, which has a top speed of 25 knots. Even so, it still takes the crew an hour to get to the stricken yacht.
When I arrived on scene, I saw a very large yacht. Its sails were up, but they were in tatters. The dangers to the oarsman was that he would not be able to go against the tide. The tide was pushing him backwards. It was going to be, just using one sail, was going to be a very long sail back to any safe haven.
But unfortunately, the broken sail isn't this sailor's only problem.
We then started getting reports through that he was injured. We weren't sure of the apparent injuries at that point in time, so we just knew his sails were damaged. He'd lost his power, so he hadn't got an engine either, and so we knew he was in quite a bad way.
Coxswain John decides to put a crew member on board. It means manoeuvring the 18-ton lifeboat directly alongside the drifting yacht in large swells.
It can be difficult to transfer onto another vessel, but given that we got the casualty to steer as steady a course as he could, and the Shannon is exceptionally manoeuvrable, just have to wait for the right moment, move in, and the guy has to make his move.
I proceeded after the rear cockpit where the casualty was. I then, trying to assess him, he was obviously well equipped, he got good sailing gear on, he got good waterproofs and a life jacket on, but I was just looking at him, he looked well in his face, but I could see his left arm was hanging limply by the side of his body, and the fingers and everything looked quite badly swollen.
I injured my hand a couple of days beforehand, and I didn't realise how bad it was because I had no feeling in the arm at all.
Keith lost the use of his left arm in a motorway accident in 1992. 4 weeks ago, he set sail from the Isle of Wight, aiming to become the first disabled person to complete a single-handed, non-stop round Britain sailing challenge.
The trip itself has been going quite well, even though I lost my main sail on the west coast of Shetlands.
Keith has so far managed to sail over 2,000 miles around the British Isles. Now, just 200 miles from completing his non-stop circumnavigation back in the Solent, he's faced with coming into port, bringing his challenge to an early end.
I had the wind against me, I had the tide against me. I wasn't making any way at all, I was going backwards. And one of the wind farm boats from Lowestoft called up Dover Coast Guard, and they said I'm looking in a really, really bad state. And I kept saying to the Coast Guard, the boat is okay, there's nothing wrong with the boat whatsoever. I don't accept help at all from anyone unless I really, really have to. I do everything on my own. I don't mind doing things on my own to prove I can do it. When I saw the RNLI, I was happy to see them, but I insisted this is only assistance and not a rescue, because there's no way I want to be rescued. I was ordered in by the Coast Guard, and you're just assisting me by showing me the way.
Chatting to the casualty, I sympathised with him that he wanted to complete his non-stop round the British Isles disabled voyage, and I could fully understand that.
It upset me a bit, really upset me a bit, being forced to go ashore. I think I cried for nearly half an hour.
Oh, he was nearly round, he'd nearly achieved his ambition. But the fact that he never had an engine, he wouldn't have been able to get out of anyone's way. There's big wind farms down there, you know, lots of turbines. He's relying on most things keeping out of his way, other than him keeping out of theirs.
Coxswain John decides that Keith must be assisted ashore as soon as possible.
Ready?
But towing a yacht this size means the lifeboat can now only achieve a top speed of 5 or 6 knots.
I think I was on board for about 4 hours, something like that, for the time it took us to bring him from when we attached the tow to when we got back alongside in Lowestoft. And yeah, I mean, he was obviously able, because he made me a cup of tea and things like that, which was very nice. So it wasn't all graft at all at any time. I was helming the boat a lot of the time.
I think he didn't want to let go of it. He was enjoying it too much. He said, "You've really got a lovely boat here. It feels really good sailing it."
If the RNLI hadn't assisted the vessel, I feel that rather than intervene at a really good time, someone else would have had to have rescued him, and it would not have been as a positive outcome.
It's a massive achievement to sail round, let alone on your own, let alone when you've got a disability like that, you know. He did a fantastic job, and you can understand him being disappointed because he was nearly done the whole thing.
The tidal section of the River Thames covers nearly 100 miles of water, from the Thames estuary in the east all the way through the capital and out to Teddington Lock in West London. Over 10 million people use this stretch of water every year. And since 2002, there have been 4 lifeboat stations in our capital. The Thames crews have their own special class of lifeboat, the E-class, the fastest in the fleet, capable of over 40 knots. They're kept afloat for the quickest response possible, and the boat's speed and agility mean that lifeboat crews can often arrive at incidents before road-based emergency services. Of all the lifeboat stations on the Thames, Tower is the busiest. In fact, it's the busiest in the whole country, saving the most lives each year.
Tower station is quite unique in its own way. The obvious one is it's different to our colleagues out on the coast. We're right in the middle of the capital city. Huge footfall all around us on the embankments, the bridges, with thousands and thousands of people.
With all these people packed into the local area, the potential for incidents on the River Thames is always high.
At Tower alone, we were running about 23% of all the RNLI's medical call-outs. So we're getting a fair number.
To cope with the demands of our capital, Tower Station always has a full crew on shift, ready to be on the water within just 90 seconds of a call coming in.
When that bell goes at Tower, it really is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. You could be called to a person in the water, somebody that's injured on one of their boats, somebody that needs medical attention, or you could be sent to a car crash or a bike crash on the roads nearby.
We kind of act almost like an ambulance on the river. It might be that we can get from one end of the city to the other, water-based, a lot quicker than what they can get in ambulance.
Regular training sessions are a priority for all lifeboat crew here, especially in first aid.
Do you want to put your arm above your head like that so it's bleeding? Are you okay to hold it?
Yeah.
You put your hand on the cut. Keep it up high and that'll help you stop bleeding. Are you warm enough, Stan?
Yep.
Not too cold?
Brilliant. Index. We like to keep them on their toes, and so as you see, I come out with an arm injury, lots of blood, the skin actually opened up, which we use the moulage kits for, to do the training. So a lot of the time they'll never know what's going to happen, so it's just they have to think immediately on their feet.
You could be faced with anything at any time, and so to be trained in as many areas as possible is possibly, yeah, it's good just to think outside of the box all of the time, I suppose.
They've saved me. They've saved me.
On a clear, cold February day, a call comes into the station.
We were sitting, relaxing, having a cup of tea, and then the bell went.
A construction worker has had a serious accident.
Our initial report was a gentleman injured on the barges opposite the station that had been hit with an angle grinder.
Hello, the Coast Guard, Lifeboat, that's us, launched on service.
When you get information like that, straight away your brain starts doing overtime, and you start to visualise and think of actually how bad is this going to be. My heart skips a beat.
At first we didn't know where the injury was. As we launched and was heading across the river, we got more information that it actually hit him in the face.
The potential for injuries from an ankle grinder are just horrendous. You could slice your neck and bleed out, you could lose digits, you lose the ability to see if it hit you in the face, a whole plethora of things. It could be particularly nasty.
When we approached the scene, we could see one gentleman standing up, waving to us.
You all right, fella?
He's split him.
Okay.
Himself with an angle grinder.
Right. The wounds that we saw where a gash ran right up his lip, up towards the base of his nose, but he also had significant rub points, or sort of grazing down the side of his face, where the angle grinder had obviously bounced down the side of his cheek.
Eyes okay? Rest of your body all right?
Yeah.
Right. If you're happy there, just a wee second, what I'll do is I'll give you a bandage to hold over that for yourself, and if you're all right, we'll take you on here, we'll get you across and off in an ambulance.
Yeah. We could see how pale and ashen he was, and then we started to assess his injuries.
Stan, ambulance at station.
For a wound like that, there's surprisingly little that we can do. But the one big tool we have always got with us, and it sounds a bit kind of cheesy, is TLC.
What's your name, fella?
Reg.
Reg, okay. I'm Chris.
The casualty, Reg, has been working in construction on riverboats for the past 4 years.
I thought I'd lost my teeth at first. I just thought the worst at first when it happened. But I actually got angry that it ruined my looks, so I started losing my temper, kicking things, and this is all why my lip is in half. But I think that's just adrenaline as well that was kicking in.
It's quite hard to estimate the volume of blood, but his top and his jeans were very well changed colour.
It was something out of a horror movie. Literally, my lip was severed in two, so completely two halves.
Because of the wounds that you had, we couldn't offer him pain relief because how we deliver that pain relief would have caused him significant discomfort. We're very lucky that he was fully mobile. So once we'd got him his wounds dressed, then we could safely get him onto the lifeboat.
Let's stitch that up.
Oh, keep that on there.
Reggie is taken back to the tower treatment room to await an ambulance and hospital attention.
Started to cut a structural steel wall called a bulkhead. As you cut metal, if it's under tension, it will move and part. That's what happened. It parted and it bit the blade. Once the blade bit, it basically caused all that momentum that was moving forward has come to a stop, and all that energy's got to go somewhere. So it's catapulted the grinder, and at that point in time, I've lost grip of it, and it's shot round and done a 180 and hit me in the face.
In the grand scheme of things, against an angle grinder, you could say he got off lightly. However, the wound itself, it's significant enough. He was in a lot of distress, an awful lot of pain.
You've done well. Right, if you're going to do it proper.
There was just pain coming from everywhere. I was near enough to turn white. As you know, I'm quite a tan person. I've got olive skin, and I was pale as anything. So I'd lost a lot of colour to my skin.
Do you want a selfie?
I was going into shock, and there's just, continuously talking to me, trying to keep me awake and making sure that I didn't go unconscious or anything.
Yeah, you probably won't be doing much snogging tonight, but that'll be fine. It's raining in a few days.
After a short while, a bit of chatting, he was texting his friends, took a phone call. I think that the TLC was working.
This is Reggie, 21 years old, 10 to 2, using an angle grinder.
The gentleman was very lucky. It's only literally just touched his lip. It didn't damage his teeth, his jaw. Very lucky gentleman.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, definitely.
The port town of Newhaven lies at the mouth of the River Ouse in East Sussex. The Newhaven lifeboat is among the oldest in Britain, with the first rescue boat commissioned here in 1803, some 20 years before the RNLI was formally established. The area is famous for the dramatic Seven Sisters Cliffs, which are a big draw for walkers and tourists.
We're actually very, very proud of our white cliffs in the local area because they are the iconic white cliffs of the south coast. And actually, when you see the white cliffs of Dover being portrayed on the television, between you and I, most of the time it's the Seven Sisters or the cliffs in the local area.
A lot of people walk up and take their dogs for walks over cliffs, which we get quite a few jobs from, where people don't realise that dogs will just run over a cliff chasing a rabbit.
A good way to describe the top of our cliffs would be green grass, nothing, a 300-foot drop.
An exceptionally hot, still June day. The Newhaven lifeboat station receives an unusual call from the local Coast Guard.
The initial information I got on the day was that there had been a cliff fall, potential for loss of life.
We didn't have a huge amount of information. As we departed Newhaven and headed down towards the Seaford area, we could actually see a big white cloud coming off the cliffs, and that was the first realisation as to the size of this particular fall.
There have been numerous cliff collapses in this region in the past, but this is one of the biggest in recent years. The scale of it has led to multiple calls to the emergency services, and it's not long before the event is leading local news stories.
Good evening. We start tonight with breaking news of a major search and rescue operation at Seaford Head near Newhaven. It follows a significant collapse of the chalk cliff face at around 4 o'clock this afternoon. Emergency services are at the scene, trying to establish if anyone was injured or trapped by the fall.
As the lifeboat travels to Seaford, there are concerns that 2 people could potentially have been caught beneath the cliff fall.
In the summer months, with lots of people on the beaches, and a lot of people tend to try and find a private little bit of beach. So if that means that they have to cross a few rock pools to find a little alcove, so there's potentially people that could be in these little alcoves.
In emergencies of this scale, the Coast Guard, Fire Service and the RNLI all work together to search for casualties. The Newhaven crew deploy their small Y-class boat in order to get ashore as quickly as possible.
It was a huge rockfall. We calculated it was about 50,000 tonnes, which is equivalent to about 4,000 double-decker buses. Yeah, it was a huge amount of rock. The issue with cliff falls is there is no warning. A huge amount of rock can disappear in seconds, in seconds. And if you happen to be standing there at the time, it's a one-way ticket.
Newhaven, Oscar, Newhaven, lifeboat, go ahead. Lifeboat, Oscar, if possible, can we have the Y-boat to pick up 2 firemen?
Our tasking was to bring the fire crew in so they can use their thermal imaging equipment. And the reason for that is because at that point, we were made aware that 2 people were unaccounted for. So yes, at that stage, we were looking for casualties.
George, we've just located another heat spot about halfway down.
It's not just members of the public who are in danger here. All the emergency crews are now at risk from further rock collapse.
You could hear, it was quite an eerie sort of cracking sound to see all this chalk and to see lumps still falling down. So that kind of reiterated the point that we weren't to go anywhere near or stand on the cliff fall itself because there was still danger that potentially huge chunks could still be falling down.
Around this cliff wall, probably getting on for 100 yards, the water was actually a sort of a milky white colour. So that was very strange. I hadn't seen that before.
We felt like ants, if I'm honest with you.
After a full sweep of the area with thermal imaging equipment, it's clear the people who were unaccounted for have not been caught in the cliff fall. The fire crews call off their hunt for bodies. But another issue has now developed overhead. Groups of onlookers are getting increasingly close to the collapsed cliff edge.
Somebody's broke through the cordon, right on the edge of the cliff. Blue t-shirt and shorts.
It is really difficult to understand why people would stand on the edge of a cliff generally. Why they would stand on the edge of the cliff when there's just been a huge rock fall, I probably can't answer that question. No idea.
While the police and Coast Guard above alert the onlookers to move away from the unstable cliff edge. Below, the lifeboat crew focuses on returning the emergency services safely to their base further along the beach.
I don't even get wet. Cheers, guys.
It turned out to be quite a long day, yeah, and it was really hot as well, which obviously makes the situation a bit worse when we're in dry suits because you're just sweating profusely. So we quite happily get back on board, have a couple of drinks and then return to station.
Although we were mainly waterborne transport, I think it was vital to the operation. So I was pleased with what we did that day.
Back in central London, it's a warm summer's evening. And Tower Lifeboat Station is living up to its reputation as the busiest in the country. An urgent call comes in. A dog is reported to have fallen in the Thames.
It's policy in the institution that we'll always launch to dogs because there is a very high chance of the owner or a member of the public going into the water after that animal. We was just coming under Charing Cross Bridge when we was told that a person has now entered the water trying to rescue the dog.
When you hear that there's a person in there as well as a dog, it does almost, things become a lot more complicated.
One of the major risks to the person that's gone into the water is still the currents, the cold. If they've jumped in from a height, they're going to suffer from cold shocks, they're going to inhale some of the Thames, they're going to try and hold themselves afloat and hold the dog. If it's a large dog, the dog is going to try and climb up them to get out of the water, which is going to push them down under the water.
There was a crowd of people on the wall looking as well. As we got a bit closer, you could see a young guy, barefooted. He was balancing on the metal chains that are attached to the side of the river. He was holding on with one and balancing on the bottom one like a tightrope, and he was holding on to a dog with one hand as well.
I was quite astounded that he was actually managing to stand on one of the chains and hold on. The chains obviously are in the water most of the time, so they're covered in weeds, they're very slippery. He had no shoes or socks on, so just to stand on the chains like that on barefoot was quite a task. He'd done very well to actually hold on. Stay tight, all right, we're going to come right up to you.
There was no real way for him to get out of the river without actually entering the water again. Obviously, I had no idea how he'd got to the place that he'd got to at that point, but there was a lot of boats around. The tide was running quite strongly at that point. Yeah, he wouldn't have been able to get out from where he was without some kind of help.
We're going to go very slowly so we don't cause any wash. Right, first I'm going to take the dog, right? I took the dog from him and passed him back to Emma. I then got hold of the guy.
I was wondering whether, was I going to get bitten or, was it going to panic? Was it going to jump back in the river?
There was quite a relieved look on the casualty's face. Once he was inboard and we got a blanket around him, he, I think I remember him just leaning back, sort of going.
It was pretty scary being that close to the Thames, to be honest. I knew that if I got in that water properly and was fully submerged, I was no longer in control of the situation.
Excuse me, mate, where can we meet you? Because that's our dog.
I was quite surprised that it turned out to be a complete stranger that had gone in after the dog. I had completely no idea.
I was walking home and I'd just gone past Westminster Bridge and I saw a couple up ahead from me with a little white dog. And basically, as I was walking past them, he kind of sniffed my dog and they started to play a little bit. And then their dog just looked at the wall and just ran at it and jumped over the wall. I was pretty shocked because it was quite a big jump. And then I think instantly I realised where we were. And because I walked by there quite a bit, I know that it's a big drop. It was a relief to see that the dog was actually in the water. I think if the tide was lower and it had landed on the rocks or the sand, the situation could have been quite worse because the dog really could have injured itself. The point when the dog went under the water, and in my head it just triggered that dog had ran out of energy, and I just said, I've got to go in. There's not any more time. There's no options here. We've got to go in.
Stan, yeah, a blanket.
It wasn't as simple as just getting in the water. I had to kind of strip off all my valuables and tie my dog up and then hope that my stuff wouldn't get taken because I just left it on the side. There was some chains on the bottom, so I managed to kind of lower myself to those chains. Once I was getting down to the water level, the dog came a little bit closer, so all I had to do was kind of lower myself down into the water, pick up the dog, and then kind of get back on the chains properly and just make sure the dog was safe and secure.
Mind your foot as you step up because it'll be slippery.
It's always a relief to, be able to
take people back to land and they'd be they're safe and well, and you know, we didn't need to call the ambulance or anything like that. So it was good to get him back up there.
As the grateful owner is finally reunited, Vaughan can retrieve his own dog too.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Once the lead was on the dog, I kind of had a bit of a moment with the owner. The lady, she kind of gave me a massive hug, and it was one of those moments where you knew how much it really meant to her, and I felt her sob a little bit, and that probably the amount of relief that she got from that situation was over.
He just literally ran along the pavement and just jumped straight over. Without even a
Just
second...
didn't think about it at all.
Without a second breath. It was like, what the hell?
Oh.
But yeah, thank you very much.
That's all right.
I'd 100% do it again. If it was a dog that I saw that needed help, I'd be there in a shot. I'd probably go in quicker this time.
I think in London, the act of kindness towards other people is reduced rather than it is in the country or down on the coast, because everyone has somewhere they've got to get to. Everyone's busy. They're normally in three-piece suits, rushing to work with important papers, and so I think a lot of it is the time and the inconvenience it would be to actually stop and help that person. If it had been his own dog, then I could understand it, but for going for somebody else, that's quite a thing.
Construction worker Reggie is now well on his way to recovery.
Basically, it happened on a Friday, and I went back to work on Monday. So I was back to work on a Monday, rearing to go. It's just an accident. What am I going to do? I'm going to sit at home and do nothing and get bored. And so why do that when I go to work, earn some money, and actually get on with things? It was 2 days after when the actual doctor who done the surgery come down and see me. He just looked at me really. He's like, "You're lucky." He had basically explained to me what I'd done and the damage that I caused. And he said you was only a few millimetres away from the main artery. So that's when it hit home for me, the damage that I could have done and how it could have had a huge impact on the rest of my life and possibly fatal. The stitches took about 2 weeks to come out. Now it's fine, it's still healing up, and just hopefully over the next year or so the scarring will go down a bit more.
Once ashore, sailor Keith was taken to hospital, where he was diagnosed with severe blood poisoning in his disabled arm.
I think it was a good call. I didn't realise how bad my arm was with the septicemia, so it probably saved my life. When I completed the mission, got back home, even though I didn't do it in one go, non-stop, I still completed it. Lots of people emailed me, congratulated me. They said, "We're not worried about you doing it in one stop, you've done it, congratulations." And that made me it made me very happy. I think I've got enough challenges for now, and I'm leaving it, hopefully, some other disabled person to pick the challenge up to do it non-stop. I've got a boat to sell if they want to buy it.
The laceration that he had, it was quite big. I'd probably say maybe 6 to 7 inches.
You okay? Yeah?
I'm upset
You sure?
Like it's wrong.
No, it's fine.
That area is notorious, really. We had been called to the same place 3 times in a row.
When we started moving him, any slight bit of movement, he was sort of yelping.